Here we are with Catharine Parr. I decided I couldn't wait another year for the Firebrand movie. People wanted this video too damn much. Catharine Parr's on-screen interpretations has varied in screen time and quality almost as much as Anne Boleyn. When it comes to The Last Wife, some of the entries realise they're running out of time and have to rush through her so quickly in order to kill off Henry and have a monologue about Elizabeth at the end. But unlike Jane Seymour and Anna von Claver, Catharine has more opportunities to stand out and show the audience just why she was the one who survived. Here's something that might surprise you though. I thought this list would be much longer because of the existence of Mark Twain's The Princess and the Pauper. Not The Princess and the Pauper, sorry, that was a Freudian slip. The Prince and the Pauper, which takes place at the end of Henry's reign and the start of Edward's. I've checked all the cast lists of all the adaptations. I haven't actually read the book. Well, all the adaptations that actually feature the Tudor era. Obviously, we're not talking about the Barbie movie here. Even if it is the best adaptation, Catharine Parr doesn't appear in any of them. So I guess we'll have to save all of those interpretations for Edward VI and Lady Jane Grey instead. You come to join us, Alan? Go on. Good boy. Laps? Yeah, thought so. He has to make it an obstacle course to get on my lap. When Firebrand does eventually come out, I guess I'll do what I did with Anne Boleyn 2021 and Becoming Elizabeth, where I just make a video about how much I hate it. Of course, I'm not hoping to hate it, I just don't want to be taken for a fool like I was back in 2021. Let's just say I'm going in with no expectations whatsoever. Honestly, anything could happen.
Henry, you're an easygoing man, always getting yourself into trouble, and who has to suffer, I should like to know. You go to Dover on these rainy days, you sit on your old council and get fussy and excited over nothing at all, and then you come to me and get fussy. I don't know what I'm going to do with you, I'm sure. What with one thing and another, my life just isn't worth living. I really don't know what I'm going to do with you. Oh, Henry, 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 you know you can't digest it. Take it away. And the drink.
6 wives. And the best of them's the worst.
The few minutes of Catharine Parr at the end of Private Life of Henry VIII still works as a sort of denouement to the film, if you count Catherine Howard's execution as the climax. We fade to Henry some time later where he's aged significantly and he's lonelier than ever. Kind of odd that he aged so much in a year. This and Young Bess would have you believe that there was a large gap between Howard and Parr, and Henry went unmarried for a long time before he could trust another woman again. Anna von Claver shows up at court to console her lonely ex-husband and suggests he find a new wife. A good wife. Not spiteful like the first, or ambitious like the second, or stupid like the third, or a very young one like the fifth. Hey, those were Anna's words, not mine. I don't think Catherine of Aragon was spiteful at all, and it was a bit mean to call her so when she wasn't given a chance to speak in this movie. Anyway, Henry asks Anna where such a wife can be found. All he need do is look out the window where Catharine Parr is bonding with Edward and Elizabeth. After this we have one final scene of the movie where Henry has married Catharine Parr off screen, or at least she's someone who has the same name as Catharine Parr but doesn't actually resemble her real life counterpart. You're gonna see this again and it's gonna be very annoying. Like with Catherine Howard in this film, this isn't really history brought to life. Private Life of Henry VIII is kind of like a storybook, an easily digestible recreation of the Tudor court, where the sets are obviously painted and the costumes had barely a passing glance with research. So Catharine Parr's one scene with Henry reduces her down to a typical nagging wife, keeping Henry from having his fun. This was Everly Gregg's first film role. She also worked on stage and in television later in her career. Unlike Catherine Howard's actress, she is actually appropriate for this role, being 30 at the time. Although given the dialogue she's given, she sounds a lot older, somewhere like 40. So Catherine ends up being a bit of a punchline to Henry. But given the quality of the other wives, who end up at the bottom of these lists, if I was her I'd take it as a win.
Oh, ready for this party. And ready before me. Beauty really is wasted on the young. You don't use it or believe it, and then just when you start to...
People well know and remember Anne Boleyn was my mother. Why can I not?
Is this remembrance? Or is this celebration?
When it comes to the video essay that usually follows my ranking lists, I have something very important to discuss that I wasn't originally going to bring up, but this series has left me no choice. What have they done with Catherine's brain? As I'm writing this script, Becoming Elizabeth is still airing its first season, and I haven't seen any news yet if we're going to get another. I've just gotten to the episode where Catherine dies, and if you've seen the vlogs, you'll see that I actually think this series had the potential to be good, but the three characters dragging it down were Catharine Parr, Thomas Seymour, and surprisingly, Elizabeth herself. This series is so close to being a resurgence for Tudor dramas. We've had so many bad ones in recent years, with the BBC being the only ones holding back the tide with Wolf Hall. All those faults could easily be forgiven, apart from the whole Thomas and Elizabeth thing, if they simply just changed the title so it wasn't solely supposed to be about Elizabeth. Couldn't they have just changed the title of the series so it was about the remaining Tudors, not Elizabeth herself? That way I wouldn't be so disappointed about Elizabeth's betrayal. It's easy. I know, you could call it the Tudors. Oh wait, no. Speaking of Wolf Hall, you may recognise Jessica Raine from that series where she played Lady Rochford, and let me tell you, she's pretty much playing the same character. Spiteful, antagonistic and power-hungry. Except you want Claire Foy to come and smack her in every episode. I do not believe she cares for Elizabeth for a moment. I'm not sure if it was her performance or the way she was written, but Elizabeth was likely to receive a more warmth if she went out in the snow, made a snowman, and hugged that instead.
You look thin, and you look sad.
I must say, you're a gloomy-looking bunch. Why so glum?
Our parents just died.
I said a few times in my vlogs that Catharine Parr was butchered in this series. We don't see any hint of the intelligent woman she was. Nope, not enough screen time for that. We've got to show the scenes of Thomas Seymour molesting Elizabeth shown in a sexy romantic light. From now on, I'm just going to use this clip of The Office every time I come across something like this.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
And that's probably why Catherine was written to be antagonistic and unsympathetic. It's to make Elizabeth appear more blameless in her relationship with Thomas. There is so much anger I have towards the Thomas and Elizabeth thing that I want to vent about, but rather than make this a ridiculously long segment, I just want to say that Elizabeth is meant to be a teenager in those scenes. She is aged between 13 and 15, and she is being perved on by a man in his 40s. And you think it's okay to make it romantic to the point where you had to age up the actress just so this show could have a chance at airing. But barring all the Elizabeth stuff, Catherine on her own isn't good representation anyway. Like, the first thing she does after Henry dies is jump into bed with Thomas. That's a bit silly, given that if any of your enemies found out, they're gonna whip up a storm and have you both executed for potentially murdering the king. This is Tudor England. They can make up whatever they want to get rid of people who are inconvenient. She is pretty oblivious to Thomas's advances towards Elizabeth. He could have a neon sign above his head saying he wants to sleep with Elizabeth, and as shown in the show, he was sleeping with Elizabeth, and she didn't coin on at all until she conveniently couldn't overlook it anymore. Being a post-Henry Catherine, we also see her give birth to her daughter and die as a result, but technically you don't actually see it. It all happens off screen. Thomas Seymour goes for a swim in the lake like he's Mr. Darcy, comes back and has a daughter. Then he goes down to the pub the next day and he's probably not gone for more than a couple of hours, but by the time he returns, Catherine is not only dead, she's been wrapped up and prepared for burial. That death was far too clean, when you consider how Jane Seymour died in the Tudors, where they showed how sweaty and grim it was for her. Catherine had an undignified entrance and an equally undignified exit. They could have done so much better, and they wasted the opportunity.
Lady Latimer.
Your Majesty.
You have 5 minutes.
My brother William, Your Grace, is petitioning Parliament for a divorce.
I know.
Oh, back to this goddamn series. Okay, during my first watch through of this half of the series, this was the point where I ran out of Skittles and I was grumpy over that and the sexist hodgepodge of Catherine Howard's segment. And earlier in that day, after chasing a missing package, I found my oat and coconut shower gel was damaged because the stupid delivery driver had clearly thrown it against a wall. Even then, I could have been given free ice cream and been avalanched by a bunch of golden retriever puppies and then had a mojito on the beaches of Hawaii, and I would still be pissed off. Because that's all this series does, is to piss me off. Okay, so Catharine Parr does get a little more space to breathe and introduce her character properly, as opposed to reducing her down to a simple nagging joke. But it's kind of like if, instead of having a regular bed in a tiny room, you save space by getting a loft bed. Yeah, you can finally put a desk in there, but you still have a tiny ass room. Now, much like everything else in this series, introducing Catherine is plagiarised from a better movie. Catherine comes to see Henry on behalf of her sister-in-law, Anne Bourchier, I can't remember how you say that. Anne Bourchier, let's just say that, or Boucher, I don't know how you say it. I guess I should summarise the context here. Catherine's brother William was unhappily married to Anne. She had an affair with a prior and got pregnant. In 1543, William was trying to obtain a divorce from her, which ended in him claiming her own lands that she'd inherited from her father. Fortunately for her, she managed to get them back during Mary I's reign. In this series, they do acknowledge that William Parr wanted his wife executed for adultery, and consult the king in this matter. Well, a broken clock, etc., etc. Catherine urges Henry to spare Anne from death, so in time, William may come to forgive her, and this leaves Henry stumped as he's been lawyered. Can't believe it took 3 hours to get one good scene. It's just a shame that this was given to Catherine's introduction and not a scene where she was in danger and managed to save herself. Even the costuming is semi-accurate, although Catherine's neckline is all wrong. It's a very easy scene to shoot, a simple shot-reverse shot. Very hard to mess up, but given what we were reduced to earlier, it's about time the blind squirrel found that acorn. The rest of Catherine's relationship with Henry is rushed through. Henry marries Catherine to be his companion, though Catherine never swore she was promised to Thomas Seymour. Thomas is urged to step aside by his brother, because she'd be more advantageous as a queen dowager, and Henry clearly won't live long. In the wedding scene, you get a glimpse of what could have been from this series. Accurate costumes, can you imagine? Alan, you can't bite me and then come back in here with your massive eyes. That's all you can say about this Catherine. At least we have one wife who didn't make my blood boil. Her last 3 scenes involve Henry falling down, Henry dying, and Henry being buried, all of which she is silent and has not a single line for herself. Although that bloody narrator at the end, oh my god, I hate ending narrations when there has been no narration throughout the story. Even then I hate narration through the story anyway. Who even is this guy?
What?
Derek Jacobi.
I know him. That can't be.
Oh my god, he's a good actor. Why does he keep showing up in terrible things? Don't think I haven't forgotten about immortal hobo Charles Dickens.
The only chance you have of continuing is if I am completely incapacitated.
I knew something was off about this. Catherine doesn't get a what happened to her segment like everyone else in that bloody room, even Anna von Claver. She just gets included in Thomas Seymour's section saying he broke her heart. Oh, that's it. Don't you remember that she was a writer? She wrote books and psalms and meditations, fought for female education so all her women could independently study scripture. She even got a woman to paint her picture. Why can't you tell that story, you stupid Tory? Yeah, they were never going to get off that easily. Fuck this series. We're not done with it. I don't think we'll ever be done with it.
Your Majesty would find me ill-chosen for a wife.
Why?
Account of my beliefs. When a boy of 15 can be tied to a stake at Smithfield and burned for his faith.
For speaking against the sacrament. That is a sin, madam, and the toleration of it a worse sin.
Then I must be a great sinner, sir, and no fit wife for your grace.
Again, the least popular wives get the short end of the stick when it comes to the runtime of this film. Henry first spots Catherine comforting Edward after he fell from a tree, and he decides she's a perfect fit for his new wife. The scene where they discuss her opinion is Barbara Lee Hunt's only chance to really shine in this role. For the most part, she captures Catherine's reserved and educated nature. You see this through her costuming, where she dresses more like Jane Seymour, in a gabled hood and a dress that covers her bosom, a stark opposite to Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard's costumes. But unlike Jane Seymour, she can carry a conversation with him that isn't simply her listening to his endless talks about himself. Their discussion of religion is close enough to history, showing the knife edge Catherine lived on while Henry was still alive. She nonetheless shows her disgust at how Protestants as young as 15 were being burned for speaking out. Henry overlooks this and insists that he wants a wife to be his companion, which she humbly accepts. We cut to the final scene before Henry's death, where the whole family is together, as well as the Seymour brothers. Thomas still longs for Catherine, but says nothing while she acts motherly towards Elizabeth. Oh, that makes you wonder. Was Thomas looking at Catherine, or was he looking at Elizabeth? Edward states that, well, let's say the Earl of Hertford, aka Edward Seymour, states that Henry is finally happy as he has found peace. But given the jump cut to the final scene, clearly this peace did not last long. Catherine is also seen throughout the film when Henry, in the present, is on his deathbed and sees people around him. At last you can put two and two together and see where she fits into all this. I would have loved a few more scenes with her. All I ask is another 10 minutes for each wife. Yes, that spans to an hour, but we need an extra hour to save the pacing of this film. Unfortunately, not knowing the history does really make the average viewer suffer as they try to piece it all together watching this film.
Edward needs a sister, and I need... what shall we call you? A younger sister or a daughter? Will you like that? Madam, the chief thing is that we've got you, and we're going to keep you.
The next time I cover this movie in a rankings list, after this one, I'm actually going to make sure I read the book. I think I need to do this more often actually, whenever I see a film or TV show of a certain time period that was actually based on a novel and not an actual history book or just historical events. I should make sure that I read the novel. I'm going to do this with my Titanic video when I review the NBC movie No Greater Love, and I found it really did help piece together how film and novel tried to be true to history in their own way and still have the film be faithful to the book. So I haven't read the book yet, but I will have when we return to cover Edward VI and Elizabeth and Henry and Thomas Seymour, and maybe Edward Seymour and Cranmer. Anyone else? This movie should have been really, really good. It was packed to the brim with great actors, but the story dragged it down. Do you know how great this movie looks to a Tudor nut like myself? There are so few dramas that are as colourful as this. Others can be so drab, like have you seen the Saoirse Ronan Mary Queen of Scots? I haven't, but I've seen clips of it and it looks dull as crap. But this movie is so beautiful. The cut of the dresses is a little too curvaceous, but I can forgive that because I have seen much worse. Believe me, I've agreed to watch Rain. I'm really not going to enjoy that. You know, if Deborah Kerr hadn't quit MGM after this movie and gone on to star in From Here to Eternity and broken from typecast, she may never have gotten to star in The King and I, for which she was nominated for an Oscar. Yes, before Deborah Kerr was teaching a Russian man in yellowface how to be more British, she had another womanising hot-headed king to deal with. For those of you fortunate enough not to know about young Bess, this is a love story centred around the young Elizabeth I before she became queen. Who is on the other side of this love story? Is it Robert Dudley? Well, that would have made more sense. No, it's Thomas Seymour. Middle-aged Thomas Seymour. The man who historically groomed Elizabeth so he could marry his way into power and got himself executed trying to bend Edward VI to his will. I cannot look past rewriting a real-life story of sexual abuse into a romance. That is sickening and wrong, and especially the way they aged up Elizabeth into her 20s and cast Gene Simmons' own husband as Thomas Seymour. Everyone who made this movie is going to hell. Then again, this movie came out in the 50s, so maybe they've all already gone to hell. To be honest, I liked this movie before Henry died. The second Charles Lawton buggered off into That Good Night. You don't have to keep watching if you want to keep your dinner down. The entire narrative changes without Henry, including the characters' motivations, especially Catharine Parrs. Catherine is no longer the strong-willed role model for Elizabeth. She is now the other woman. But unlike Jessica Raine, she is still a sympathetic character, and Elizabeth cares about her enough to put her happiness aside and convince Edward to let them marry. And Catherine doesn't realise anything is wrong until Cat Ashley says something. She has no pleasure in sending Elizabeth away, as she cares deeply about her and doesn't get angry. And then 5 minutes later, she dies. How? Well, whatever it was, it certainly wasn't childbirth. Remember, this is still the 1950s, and because of the Hays Code, they can't discuss or show the process of child rearing on screen. We are simply told that Catherine is dying and fade to her death scene. Can someone please explain to me what she's dying of?
We don't know why. She has lost the will to live.
Oh, okay.
This Catherine may not have been a historically accurate story, but at least most of her portrayals were somewhat accurate to her character.
It is true, you are noticeably improved. If only you would make the same effort to look after yourself as you lavish on the campaign against the French.
You criticize my conduct, Kate?
No, Your Majesty.
You contradict and lecture me. Enough.
I think only of your comfort. I humbly beseech your pardon if I have offended you.
Time to get nostalgic for the 90s and the 2000s over here. I'm going to talk about scholastic book fairs. I don't even know if they still do those. But in the UK, there would always be 1 week every year when there'd be a book fair at school, which encouraged kids to read more. Or at least that was the intention. If you were a kid without money on free school dinners, you can GTFO.
Kiss my fudge and ass, go fudge yourself, fudge to get the fudge out.
And any kid that didn't care about reading probably used the money their parents gave them on candy. A lot of boys in my year piled onto the Captain Underpants books. Every year the boys would be like sitting there after going and looking at the book fair with their Captain Underpants. I wonder about the book series got a movie. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's good to see boys reading. My mother always encouraged me to get a book, but I usually just picked a cover because it looked nice, and sometimes I never actually read it. I wasn't a big reader before year 6, or 5th grade, and even then I just tended to read Jacqueline Wilson books, and not all of her books were scholastic. But the thing is, she pretty much had the same story over and over again. She was basically the Stephen King of British children's literature. The same archetypes, the same story beats, the same horrible parents. There's just usually one quirk, like this one likes baking, this one likes making lists, this one needs therapy. Come secondary school, and I spent most of my book fair money on gel pens that they sold next to the cash box. I remember in year 8 or 7th grade, I bought a ton of gel pens, and then my sister stole them all. You have to understand, sparkly purple gel pens were the height of luxury for me at the time. I could never get enough sparkly purple gel pens. Right, what was the point I was going to make here? Yeah, the Royal Diary books were a huge part in convincing children to read about history from the perspective of other time periods and cultures. You know, if your parents didn't let you read horrible histories. Sometimes the narrator was a fictional character who was writing a diary as they experienced the Blitz or serving a famous monarch. However, there was a royal collection of these fictional diaries that featured historical events from the perspectives of famous princesses and queens throughout history. In the UK, there was one about Elizabeth I that was called My Royal Story Elizabeth, but in the USA the title was Elizabeth, Red Rose of the House of Tudor. In 2000, HBO made a series adapting 3 of these stories onto screen. One was about Cleopatra, one was about Isabel of Castile, and the third was about Elizabeth I in the last years of Henry VIII's reign. Despite the episode being only half an hour long, this was a pretty good adaptation because the book isn't actually that long either, and the adaptation only cuts out small details, such as Edward getting ill or numerous pageants, just to focus on the main conflict of the story. The main fear of Elizabeth is that she will be forgotten and ignored and always be compared unfavourably with her mother. In the adaptation, the main conflict is mostly about Elizabeth's fear of losing Catharine Parr, whom she loves dearly. Don't worry, there is no Thomas Seymour in this, thank God. I don't even think he was in the book.
Father, you would be most forgiving indeed to overlook such blasphemy.
I heard no blasphemy. Beware the candied tongue that laps on royal boots, and through its sugary slime conceals a black heart.
We have another instance where the characters and situations can be read as manipulated through the lens of the main character. This Elizabeth sees characters as either friends or enemies. She has gone through a lot in her short life, and she still has a child's mindset of seeing things in black and white. Catherine is exactly as Elizabeth perceives her at the time, a loving and intelligent maternal figure that doesn't make her feel like an outsider in the same way that Henry and Mary does. We get the familiar beats with Catherine gently nudging Henry to agree with her, sometimes with mixed results, and being clever enough to avoid arrest. Catherine finds out about her impending arrest from Elizabeth, who fakes ill to get the information to her. The episode ends on a positive note, with Elizabeth triumphant in saving her stepmother, and knowing she is smart enough to survive anything.
I will never marry and grovel to any man if I become queen.
The book didn't have the same tone, as Elizabeth watched some bird eggs hatch and wished she could trade places with them and be free. She is alone, her father is dead, and she doesn't know what will happen to her. But of course the whole point was that the reader knew. Other than that, I do think we should pay this version of Catharine Parr more attention, as we see her compassion and intelligence. Jennifer Wigmore and Tamara Hope really had a good mother-daughter chemistry. I also wish this bloody series was easier to find, because I can't find the other 2 episodes anywhere. The only DVD I found is Region 1. It used to be free to watch on YouTube. Where have those days gone?
5 down, I'm the final wife. I saw him till the end of his life. I'm the survivor, Catharine Parr. I bet you wanna know how I got this far. Well, tonight we'll let you know how we got this far.
The final wife, or rather the climactic wife. While this version does not acknowledge certain events in her marriage to Henry, or her marrying Thomas Seymour afterwards, this Catherine rises above the other queens as the voice of reason, while the other 5 dive into their emotions, their losses, their humiliations, that ultimately result in a fight breaking out around who suffered the most. Anna of Cleves tries to break it up by trying to move on to Catherine, but she's just like, nah, I'm good. She's through with this competition. She can see how it's gone too far. She sees how tasteless it is to contest whether being murdered by your husband or losing a baby is more traumatic.
I don't know. It's just like, we're here in front of all these people being like, oh, let's see what gets the biggest cheer, drama or abuse. Whoa, like, should we really be doing this?
The other queens dismiss Catherine's concerns, thinking she's only saying that because she doesn't have a story to tell that can equal theirs. But she does. And for most people, this story has gone unnoticed, because the first thing people think of when it comes to Catharine Parr is being the final wife. Why should we care about her? She survived. She doesn't want that to be her story though. She wants people to know that she was a person outside of who her husband was. She was a pioneer and a feminist that, unfortunately, due to the time period she was born into, had no choice in terms of husband. None of the queens had a choice, they realise. You won't hear this on the soundtrack, but in the middle of Catharine Parr's song, I Don't Need Your Love, there's a dialogue break as the queens ask what she means by "we all disappear."
Who was Henry VII's wife?
I don't know.
Anyone? I don't know. Okay, who was Henry VI's wife? I don't know. And Henry V's wife? We don't know. Catherine de Valois.
I mean, we don't know.
Wait, isn't there a bigger problem here?
The dissolution of the monasteries.
No.
Oh my god, I get it. Since the only thing we have in common is our husband, grouping us is an inherently comparative act, and as such it necessarily elevates a historical approach ingrained in patriarchal structures.
At that moment, they turn the remainder of the song into a remix and decide they don't need Henry's love. They're tired of fighting, and they unite against him. This is the musical's commentary of sexism towards women, especially female performers. Those who are constantly forced to lie and backstab to exist in a man's world and leaving others in the dust, only to be toppled by another person who will leave them in the dust. They're done with that now. Catherine's style is based on Alicia Keys, and you couldn't have chosen better, really. Alicia's voice has always had that slow build to a bombastic, breaking free of all restrictions flair, which fits perfectly here as Catherine liberates herself from Henry's influence. Of course, in the final song, the queens choose an alternate future for themselves where they can live happily. For Catherine, she doesn't even choose a life with Thomas, surprisingly. She chooses the queens, who have found happiness, and brings them together, thereby creating the musical we see before us. It all comes full circle.
you want me to say I love you, I will, Kate. But if you love me, you must wed the king.
I'd rather your brother had come, or Cranmer. They'd only have talked of the love of God.
I told you we'd be seeing Rosalie Crutchley again. Did I think it would take this long? No, but we finally got here. The last time we saw Rosalie Crutchley on this channel was way back at the beginning, when I covered the most obscure Tudor movie made by Disney in the 50s. This film had a pretty great cast. We had Glynis Johns, Mrs. Banks herself, as Mary Tudor the Elder. We had Richard Todd as Charles Brandon, Michael Gough, Michael Gough, Alfred. We had Alfred as the Duke of Buckingham. And as Catherine of Aragon, Rosalie Crutchley. One of the larger flaws of the movie was it's supposed to take place in 1515, where Henry VIII would have been in his mid-20s, but he appears as he's typically depicted in his 40s. Crutchley was fine for this role, though she disappeared from the movie before the halfway point. But here, Crutchley has a whole episode to move around, but the narrative just gets a bit usurped by Henry's death. But hey, it's worth it because it's Keith Michelle. The story begins with Catherine being summoned by Henry so he can get the measure of her, and asks her to marry him. She is being urged to by Cranmer and Edward Seymour. Thomas, on the other hand, is reluctant, but she does accept Henry despite how clear it is that she's terrified of him. And who wouldn't be? I don't really want to touch on if Catherine and Henry were able to have relations owing to Henry's health condition, at least not until the next video. Despite being married for over 3 years, they never had children, and when Henry considered having her arrested, their lack of child didn't seem to be the reason. Catherine, though she seemed scared of Henry at the start of the episode, gradually comes to care about him and falls into her role as queen rather easily, probably because she already has experience running her former husband's estates. Henry admires her sensibility, and the royal children see her as a role model to admire. Unfortunately, she becomes too confident in her place for Henry's liking, and that's almost her undoing. After Henry's death, Thomas proposes to her, which she accepts, but the mood of the scene isn't happy, probably because we know what's to come for her. Crutchley also had a brief cameo in the first episode of Elizabeth R, in a series of flashbacks from Elizabeth's literal point of view. It's a shame we didn't get to see more, but considering the episode is covering 10 years, plus Glenda Jackson doesn't really look young enough for these scenes, these brief flashes were all we could get. I suppose the one thing stopping Crutchley from grabbing first place is that she very rarely changes her facial expression. There's the occasional smile, but most of the time it's just the same plain face. And unfortunately, like most of the actors in this series, when there's a really emotional scene, she's depending on being theatrical about it, so it's clear that everything's being exaggerated.
Do you suppose that it is a bad thing that everyone in England should be able to read the Bible for themselves? Even though some would say that the reading of the Bible leads to heresy.
If they say so, then they are wickedly charging the holy, sanctified word of God with the offences of man.
You are right. I mean, do people deny themselves food because they see others overeat? Or avoid using fire because they have seen a neighbour's house burn down? Oh, blind ignorance, Mr. Latimer, to slander God for man's offences.
I know. I'm surprised too. This is not going to be the last time you see Jolie Richardson on my channel. She's been in a lot of historical stuff. Her and Vanessa Redgrave. Where she'll be on those lists is anyone's guess, but at least she gets to be at the top of this one. Let's hope Alicia Vikander doesn't knock her down to second place. While I would have liked to have seen Catherine introduced during the Pilgrimage of Grace arc, which itself was really well portrayed, this Catherine nevertheless managed to make herself memorable in the last 5 episodes of this series. The show had the advantage of picking actresses who left an impact. Well, apart from the first actress to play Jane, because obviously it wasn't very impactful if they had to replace her. Her actions represent the real Catherine, almost perfectly. For a series best known for its dependence on sex and nudity to sell history, they actually did care about the history a lot, and it shows in Catherine's portrayal. Someone who was full of compassion, but did not let herself succumb to her emotions when her enemies wanted to take advantage of it. I love the interactions between her and Elizabeth, where it seems that Catherine was the only one who believed that Elizabeth was destined for greatness. At that time in history, everyone was looking to Edward, while they saw Elizabeth as an embarrassing mistake. And that's why the Becoming Elizabeth version leaves such a bad taste in my mouth, where Catherine was cruel and spiteful and shrewish, the exact opposite to what we see here. Even when Mary was turning against her, she didn't stop caring about her. She didn't literally threaten Mary with having her face forced shut with a scold's bridle, which wasn't even invented yet.
Do you know what they do to women in the villages who gossip, Mary? They bind their mouths. Perhaps I suggested to your brother, the king.
Are you so very proud of your own actions that you present this face to me?
Have you spoken to your sister? What did she say?
I'm not here to report my sister's words to you. I'm here to speak my own. Mother.
God, that portrayal still makes me shudder. I rank her above Rosalie Crutchley mostly because she seemed to have more facial expressions and more room to manoeuvre. Can we get a version that's better? Maybe? All I have to say is that the show nailed the landing when it came to the final wife. This is what I think of when I imagine Catharine Parr in novel form. Sometimes when I'm reading historical fiction and a real-life person shows up, their most memorable on-screen counterpart is how I imagine them. So when I was reading The Queen's Gambit, she was, unaccountably, Jolie Richardson. And seeing her in this series makes me even more mad at Thomas Seymour for ruining everything for her. But whether she would have survived pregnancy or not, Thomas was always going to drag her down with him.
More good women have been lost to marriage and to war, famine, disease and disaster. You have talent, darling. Don't squander it.
We did it! All 6 wives! Granted, I'm redoing Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, because those were some of my earliest videos, and not only do I have more portrayals to talk about, but those videos make me cringe. But now we can move on to other Tudors. Granted, Thomas Cromwell, Mary I, Henry VIII, Shakespeare and Elizabeth I are reserved for their own lists eventually when I hit certain subscriber milestones, but there is still plenty of kings and queens to choose from, as well as courtiers. There's even different eras of history. I've already branched out to the attack on Pearl Harbor and the Titanic, which I will eventually finish. Turns out when you do a series about the largest ship in the world, it takes a long time. Of course, I still have a video essay covering the theme surrounding Catherine after this, and I still have to finish up with Catherine Howard. It's pretty tricky to write about, I have to come back to it in bits, but I know my viewers like it when I talk about Catherine Howard, so I might as well continue on with it and try and get it out before the end of the year. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go and scan Wikipedia before the Serpent Queen comes out, so I can barely pretend that I know anything about Catherine de' Medici. Caption time! Time for captions! So something I do at the end of every rankings list, apart from the Titanic ones because they've been doing in several different sections. What I do is I find a frame while I'm editing, I put it on a community post, people can make captions off the post in a certain amount of time before I finish editing up. And today is the day I hope to finish editing. So it's a little different this time because rather than find a frame while I'm editing, whether it's just like a really funny still frame, I decided why not take this picture of Romola Garai, is that how I say it? I've just been calling her Romola throughout the entire coverage of the series as Mary I, or, you know, pre-Mary I. She has not become Mary I as of yet, which we all thought was going to happen by the end of the series, but it didn't happen. We didn't get the powerful, bombastic I am Mary I, look upon my works ye mighty in despair speech that we all really, really wanted to have. Some people who have written on the post, they've done the speech that they want to have seen Mary I doing, and of course a lot of it is I am the chosen servant of God, I will burn Protestants and such. Mostly because that's how Mary I was, but I really want to say here and now before I start reading the captions, that is not how I feel towards Protestantism. I am an atheist. I used to be a Catholic, been an atheist since about 2019. Please do not interpret this video or take it out of context for me wanting to burn Protestants, because I don't want to burn Protestants. No, don't burn people, that's not very nice. Only time you should set people on fire is when you're playing video games and they're not real. Believe me, it's really satisfying when you've got a lot of anger in you. God may forgive the people of England, but I have not. God may even bless the Protestants, but I cursed them. I am Mary, the one people took everything from, and the one whom people refused to listen to when she needed help on the brink of death. But I was reborn to their misfortune. I will take everything from these people, and I will refuse to listen to their pleas for help when they are on the brink of death, in the fire. My loving subjects, night has fallen for my late brother the king. The darkness has plagued this land too long. I, Mary Tudor, daughter of Henry VIII and Catharine of Aragon, the true heir, will rise like the dawning sun. My light shall guide us to glory, to happiness and to God. Stand with me, stand with your heart. My country is ill from usurpers and heretics, and I declare no more. Justice must be served, and I bow to your effects and struggles you have had to face. We have felt death itself right in our faces. They cannot extinguish the flames of Christ and the Pope. The dawning is upon us, my lords. Pray for me, pray for England, and pray for that spring that will come, as the cruel winter dies along with the Protestant evil. We shall meet again, but in glorious heaven. All shall be well. Omnis bene erit. I don't know what omnis bene erit means, but I'm sure people will let me know. When he was younger, they said, my father was a great man. But greatness comes at a loss. Fear of traitors, even madness in the end. One only remembers the misdeeds of kings once they have perished, and what once was great is henceforth called terrible. He moved heaven and earth for the whore, and shoved me aside with it. But now I will not move. I will not bend or step aside when a heathen church ravages my country, because it is my country. It is mine by right, if not by law. I shall show them greatness. I shall bring England back to the true faith. I shall remain steadfast where my brother and father could not. I shall be strong where they were weak. I shall burn what they let simmer. I shall show them greatness, and I shall show them terror. I am Mary Tudor, legitimate daughter of King Henry VIII and the rightful Queen of England, Catharine of Aragon, future Queen to England, a true Catholic and protector of the true faith, descendant of Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, descendant of King Henry VII and Queen Elizabeth of York. Be glad my brother lives for now, for if he didn't, I would have burned all you heretics before you had the chance to speak such heresy to me. You better pray my brother keeps living, for I am not God. I cannot show endless mercy. I can only show the same kind of mercy you have shown upon me, which is none. So pray for my brother the king to live. Pray for it, because it is the only way you can save yourself from me. God, save the king. The microphone. Bomb. I don't have a microphone, apart from this one, but I'm not dropping it. This one's nice and short. I, your Queen, Mary I, shall lead England to the true faith. I am Mary, true-born daughter of King Henry and Queen Catharine of England, and rightful heir to the throne, and I will inherit. I will wear my father's crown, as I was always meant to, as my birthright. As God is my witness, I will be queen, and I will purge this country of all its corruption and heresy. With God's help, I will return the strays of England back to the fold of the Holy Roman Church. I will stand in defiance of all those who would and have denied me my rightful place. I am Mary Tudor, daughter of the King, and I will be Mary, Queen of England. I will rule, so help me God. Okay, I don't know why, but for some reason there's a bit of a flickering over there. I'm not sure if it's just the clouds passing over the sun or something. I've got like 3 lights on me at the moment, plus the sun. My lords, fortune has long conspired to keep me from my seat of power, and many times I thought that my birthright would be forgotten. I have suffered many a man who thought me a stubborn upstart, clinging to a title that I supposedly had no right to. And I have suffered the sneers, preachings, threats, false-faced pleadings, and unwanted pity of the hundreds sent to throw me off my course. And yet I stand here, having never relinquished the gift my mother gave me the day I quickened in her womb, the heirloom of England. It is often said my father was a mountain of a man, a sovereign of stone. Well, I am the mountain's daughter, and I shall not fall. Think not my womanhood shall spare you my wrath. I have suffered unjustly. My once innocent skin has turned from the porcelain of a princess to the mud of a so-called bastard, to the steel of a queen. And I swear to you, I shall send suffering back to those who justly deserve it. So to the followers of Luther, or the Mummers' Queen, who dances to Northumberland's tune, or to anyone who wishes to halt me in my path, I say this: Look to all those who opposed me 20 years ago, and count how many are still living. Stand in my way, and you shall feel my fury, a flame that shall ne'er be put out, a flame that will burn you. I am Esther come again. I shall be God's prophetess, and no man shall ever tell me to kneel before another. God be my witness, I shall go down in history as a drink served with a piece of celery. Yes, we do have Bloody Marys in the UK. They're very popular. I mean, I haven't had one, and I've stopped drinking recently, so... Anyone else getting Sansa start going back to the North vibes? And I put, yeah, but only Sansa in the books, not Sansa in the show, because there was all that bollocks with Ramsay. Heed my words, Protestant deviants. I, Mary of the houses of Aragon and Tudor, shall force upon you the journey to hell. From your sacrificial ashes a new age shall be born. Tempus Veritas, the true queen shall reign. I am Mary, majesty of faith. Kneel before me and rejoice. And I shall strike down upon thee with that. I can't trying to do it with southern accent. And I shall strike down upon thee with greatest vengeance and furious anger, and you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee. I'm trying to sound southern USA, but I probably just sound like a git. I'm not going to try and do a Samuel L. Jackson accent because I just don't have the vocal range for it. I had that Bible verse written down in a notebook somewhere, but the notebook just vanished into hammerspace. God be my witness, I shall burn whoever stands between me and the bookstore. Well, sometimes I have to basically call an AA sponsor when I'm in the bookstore and I have like a pile of books and I'm like, if you buy these, you know you're going to have to like go without a few things for the next couple weeks before you get paid. But it's just that I want the books. I want the books. Look at all my books. God-fearing people, I come to you as the rightful heir of the throne of my father after my brother's death. I come to you as a queen who will bring this country back to God, whether it be by salvation or fire. The heretics and the traitors will be no more, and a new age will be upon us. May God guide us in obedience. That's all the captions for today. That was quite interesting, and once again I hope people don't actually take that as read that I want Protestants to burn, because I don't. Don't burn people. Don't burn people, kids. A lot of illegal ramifications to it. That is the end of the rankings video, and this has been an interesting quest. I mean, as I said just now, I'm also going to go back and redo Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon, because they were my oldest videos, and I can't look at them again because I just cringe a lot, and there was a lot I want to say about Catherine and Anne Boleyn that either needed better wording or just I didn't actually say. And of course there are several versions that have either popped up since I made those lists, or weren't on the list at all because I didn't know that they existed, because I didn't do that great research. Well, I'm going to say I didn't do that great research. I pretty much just went through the movies and TV shows and I thought, throw in 6 because everyone loves 6. And then that was pretty much it. But obviously there's several more to think of. I do kind of want to structure things a lot more clearly, because back then I was pretty much just going off pretending to be that angry critic that hates everything. And I think that era is dead, isn't it? People are sick of the negativity now. They're sick of being like, don't tell me something's bad just because you don't like it. Like, I can enjoy stuff. Like, that's why I'm just like, every time I hear people whining about stuff in Star Wars, I'm just like, I can't be bothered. Like, it might have its flaws, but really I just can't be bothered. Okay, I'm just going to enjoy it, unless they do something really fucking problematic, which I don't think they'll do. I mean, they could do better. They should have done better with John Boyega. That's all I'm going to say. But I'm glad they're finally acknowledging and standing up to the people who are harassing their non-white actors. But other than that, okay, I'm going to go and thank my patrons now before I get in any deeper. So yes, my lovely patrons whose names you see on the screen right now, they have been supporting the channel for every video I make, but practically every video I make, And in exchange for their support, they get different benefits depending on which tier that they pledge to. So you can get scripts ahead of time for one tier, or you can get that plus early access to videos, or that, or all of the benefits that the other tiers have, plus a shout out in the credits and writing advice. And that is a tier reserved for the King and Queen patrons. And this is the shout out to Alison Cuff, Larissa, Lady Eternal and Leslie Williams. Thank you so much. And if you want to support the channel, head on over to Patreon right now. There's a link in the description. Of course, if you don't have the means to do so, that's perfectly fine. You can support the channel as well by subscribing, sharing the video around, leaving a like and a comment. It helps boost the video up the algorithm ladder, helps me reach more people, and I would like to reach more people. I'm literally 240 subscribers away from reaching 5,000 subscribers, and I'd really like to do that because that means, hang on, I can review this book here, because that's what I do every time. For every 1,000 subscribers I get, I review historical fiction in book form, obviously, and I will also do a bookcase tour. I don't know how those work, but we'll see how it goes. I might rearrange the entire bookcase beforehand